Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning, folks. Welcome back to Financial Issues. We are live this morning. I'm Seth Jason, and it is a joy to be here with you all. 610-363-1110 is the number to call in if you would like to join the conversation. We'll have the phone lines open. 610-363-1110. Some good stuff on today's show, folks. Before we get to all of it, though, I've got a special treat for you. My friend, you know him and love him, Jason MacDowell, joins me today to talk about what's going on with China. Jason, welcome, brother. It's great to have you on with me. I'm excited.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Seth.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Jason and I always get to have a lot of fun together. It's great when Jason gets to be on with Shanna, but I like to have a turn once in a while, Jason, right? No, it's the brilliance level is far higher when it's you and Shanna, but it's always fun to get to do it with me and you as well. So let's jump right into it here, brother. So there's obviously been a lot of talk going on when it comes to trade issues between the United States and China. That's really been one of the big kind of tipping points of the markets in these last couple weeks, and pretty much every single mainstream news cycle has been kind of hyper focused on this. But what can you tell us about this, Jason? Does it seem like China is kind of being put in a pen here? Is it really just kind of turning into another Cold War between the U.S. and China? What do we need to know about this, brother?
Yeah, absolutely, Seth. So we're all under some tariff fatigue. So this subject, what I want to focus on is just simply that China has limited cards. Trump carries more cards. And that's kind of what I want to focus here is just how many cards does China actually really have, or that I believe, and how many have they already used? So we'll break that down a little bit. So the current tariffs right now in China are, they're continuing to increase. Each time that China reacts, they seem to have a new number each day. And even today, it could even change. So at one point it was 125%, then it was 245%. I mean, these tariffs just keep rising with everything that China reacts to. So that's essentially what's happening from Trump. At least that's been his pattern of actions. So Trump did exempt smartphones, servers, chips, solar panels, and TVs, and also has a 90-day tariff relief for all other countries but China. So he made this pretty clear when he did that. This is about getting the best deal for the U.S. with not only the world, but specifically with China, because they seem to be holding a lot more against us there. So this China's trade with the U.S., though, is more important to China specifically. How this hurts China is that exports are 3% to U.S. and our exports to China are just barely over 0.5%. But we're exporting essentially food and energy to them, so they got to feed their country that way. So they like our business more, and that's what Trump knows. So this leaves China with a few options to fight with. And we're seeing that they are using some of these options. They have used a couple of them, or basically 1.5. And then there's some other I'll just cover here. So I fall into the camp that China runs out of bullets, or as Trump has stated, China will run out of bullets first. So I fall in that camp. That's just my opinion. That's kind of where I'm coming from here.
Yeah.
So the first one we're going to start with is the withholding of critical exports like rare earth minerals used in electronics. Now, China's already done this. So this is effectively the first one I wanted to talk about. Everything that China exports, though, is also produced by other countries. So if we take rare earth minerals, the U.S. is actually the number 2 producer of rare earth minerals. And economists have noted that we can actually bypass China in the meantime while the deregulation is happening in our country. Trump is trying to deregulate, cut the red tape with the EPA. So while we work on that, they believe that we can go to Australia or Thailand, which hold about a 10% tariff right now, to get around that. Now, those are subject to negotiations. So at whatever that ends up being, it's going to be better than whatever China is trying to cut off from us. So on April 16th, China actually did this. They stopped completely their rare earth exports, and Trump raised the tariffs to 245%. So we see that happening. That's where the reaction basically is. So the next one is pressuring U.S. companies in China. So China relies heavily on foreign investment, and it went negative before Trump as companies fled to Vietnam and Mexico due to lower labor costs and supply chain diversification. A few of those companies, these are non-biblically responsible companies, by the way, but I want to just talk about them because they're big companies, recognizable, is that Apple, Dell, Samsung, and Nike all left China for those lower labor costs already and supply chain diversification before the tariffs even started. So that already was happening.
And Jason, some of those companies, just to jump in for a second, I know perhaps not now, but in the past there was at least whisperings of them being guilty of certain human rights abuses. I know, so it's interesting that they're leaving China now. Fascinating stuff. Yep.
Which comes up on Evaluator's BRI screener. If you go to FISM.org and use the biblically responsible screener, you'll be able to filter out companies that do have those human rights violations. So that's an important note there. Yeah. So the next one is China can devalue its currency, which is what it did in the last trade war, which was an attempt to boost the export business in support of a slowing economy, China's, that is. So in August of 2015, the People's Bank of China surprised markets with 3 consecutive devaluations. This took the Chinese yuan knocking over 3% off its value. Now, where this hurts China is devaluing on, if it's over 200% or 245% tariff would more than double China's food and energy import costs. So that's where it kind of hurts them, but also trying to make exports cheaper. So this hurts China more so in the import side. So the last one I want to talk about is, this one's actually kind of funny. China can sell its nearly $1 trillion of US Treasuries and mortgage bonds to crater the bond market. Now that sounds very weighty. That sounds sort of very impactful that China could do. On April 15th, just before the 16th, there was speculation as to China unloading some treasuries, and it came with quotes of China shooting itself in the foot by other analysts, mainly because if China is trying to devalue its own currency with yuan, selling the treasuries that they have there in the bonds to gain more business will actually bring US dollars back to Beijing, which then would be used for yuan, creating an increase of value to its own currency. So that essentially wouldn't work. So that's where the quotes that were coming on about China shooting itself in the foot. But still, it's possible that China could do it. So here's where Trump can actually stop. And this is interesting. What I found is Trump could seize the US treasuries that China holds due to the estimated $1 trillion in debt that China owes to the US since the 1940s. So I thought this was interesting. The debt is complicated. It's from a wartime loans and investments from the Republic of China, which was the predecessor to the People's Republic of China. So the old name to China.
Yeah, right.
So that was actually an area. And this also could be effectively used by Trump for also stopping a banking crisis. So I guess if they were to sell that off too, Trump would have this basically in his back pocket to say, hey, to stop a banking crisis here, we're going to do this. So this is just an option. I don't know if Trump would actually use this or what the red tape is with this. This was just an area of where I could see Trump actually doing this. And the last one, of course, is Trump could go as far if they get, push comes to shove, they could deny access to U.S. capital markets like ETFs. China is trying to access here through the market makers. There's been reports of China opening ETFs to the market makers like the U.S. Citadel and Jane Street to help boost market liquidity. The past 2 years, China's ETF business surged to over $500 billion from government bodies' investments. At the same time, China has also been purchasing its own ETFs to support its own market. So to me, that just simply says they're trying to prop themselves up with US dollars. So yeah. These are all some areas there. So ultimately, China will eventually come to negotiations at some point. They'll have to. They're going to run out of bullets. They're going to run out of cards here at once that point. So there's something to block all of it.
So, Jason, that seems like good news to me. And that was kind of really my big question from all of this is there any level that we should still be concerned from an economic perspective when we consider, let's face it is a tense relationship between us and China. See, I've said before on the show that it really is kind of a resurgence of the Cold War with a new enemy. Should we be concerned or is there a level where we can say, you know what, we have the upper hand here and we're kind of just waiting for China to make their move?
I wouldn't have concerns at all. Yeah. That's just my opinion. I'm more of a hopeful person. It's like I see the good in getting the best deal for the United States because we've been giving so much out to all the other countries that no more economics 101 is no such thing as a free lunch. And we're giving everybody this free lunch, all over the place. Yeah. And if they want to negotiate, they forget how much the U.S. has been providing to them that we can take away. You can even look at Japan. Japan has 55,000 soldiers or so there. And if they want to negotiate, they forget that they're there to help protect, us helping them. So if we remove that, there's negotiation tools that aren't just monetary or just trade. There's actual soldiers around the Okay, so that's one example there. So I wouldn't be concerned.
Sure. Yeah,
we have more cards. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, that is awesome stuff. And I think it's a good reminder for us, when we're looking at biblically responsible investing, especially, folks, we want to be very careful about where our money's going, and certainly can learn a lot of lessons from this when we're talking about doing business and investing in. And I think what was really a mistake is what the United States had done, really, in kind of being able to do business with communist China for this long. We have to remember this is, politically speaking, our mortal enemy. Now, we do have a far more dangerous mortal enemy from a spiritual perspective, but really, Jason, I think it's great news overall for you, giving this to us here, and it excites me for sure. Obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on this, but man, I really do appreciate your insight, brother. So thank you for coming on with me today, Jason. It was a joy to have you. Folks, we got more financial issues coming on right after this. You're going to want to stick with us and get your calls queued up as well if you want to join the conversation. 610-363-1110. We'll be right back after this break. Stick with us.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Kids need the hope of Jesus. There's so much loneliness, brokenness, isolation, and bullying. Now, you and I, we have the opportunity to do exactly what Jesus said, to go and make disciples right where they are, right inside their public school. The Lord has been building the impact of Crossroads Kids Club, and we ask for your help to pursue a vision of greater national expansion.
To join us, visit reachOurschools.com. That's reachOurschools.com.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. On top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn.
Then they sat me down. If you were to die today, do you think you would go to heaven? And I was like, no. Keeping the child was my first stepping stone, and ever since then, God has cleaned me up from the inside out.
Help support women in need. Go to preborn.com/FISM.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shanna are hers alone and are for informational purposes only, and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Hey, folks, hope you enjoyed that segment there with Jason. I always love when Jason comes on, and as I said in the beginning there, it is always a delight when I get to interview him. I'm sure, Lord willing, we'll be having Jason on sometime early next week with Shanna once again, so always great to hear their expertise too as well. But boy, it's great to be here with you today, folks, and I would really encourage you, please call in 610-363-1110. If you got a question or you want to join the conversation that we have going on here today, it's good stuff. Of course, you can always put your questions on the live chat as well. And by the way, I do want to remind all of you, we do have a new partner commentary up as of this morning, so please go check that out. And more like as of late last night. But it's really good. It has a lot of good things to say about some of the things we're actually going to talk about in just a moment here. But I would encourage you to check that out. We actually saw in the chat, I saw Claude from Louisiana saying there's a lot of chatter that we're slowly moving back to a gold-backed dollar. Claude, I've been hearing that too. And also there is some good commentary that kind of speaks a little bit to that in today's partner commentary to give you a little bit of a glimpse kind of behind that there. So check out the partner commentary. If you're not a partner, you can become one and you can get the full access to that commentary as well as all the other things that we offer here at the ministry. It's good stuff. So grateful to be here with you all today, and I'm excited to dive into it. Let's get now to the big news from yesterday. By the way, actually, Sam is back. First, let me welcome back Sam.
Why, hello,
Sam, great to have you back. Sam was seeing his family out of town over the weekend, so it's good to have you back, man. We missed you.
Yeah, great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, Sam, let's jump right in here, shall we? So the big news yesterday, folks, and if you were looking at the markets, you probably saw this, the kerfluffle, as it were, between Donald Trump and Jerome Powell is now heating up to fever pitch. Now, this is really kind of something that's been 7 years in the making. I think ever since Donald Trump picked Jerome Powell to be the Fed chair during his first term, there was always some underlying tension. The tension seemed to build a little bit during the Biden administration. And then the question sort of became, is Trump going to do something that's never been done before and try to oust Jerome Powell before his term is up in 2026? Well, if yesterday told us anything, it certainly seems that way. So unspoken tension between the president and the Federal Reserve chair exploded yesterday. Trump slammed Powell for not lowering interest rates. So the president wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Preemptive cuts in interest rates are being called for by many." He continued saying there is currently virtually no inflation in the United States. Costs for energy and most other things are on the decline. He said further on, quote, "With these costs trending so nicely downward, just what I predicted they would do. There can be almost no inflation, but there can be a slowing of the economy unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, in Trump's words, lowers interest rates."
Classic.
Now, that is classic. You know, I was thinking, Sam, as I read that, if my kids were here, I would read that in my Trump voice. I'm not going to do that for our audience right now, but the kids love the Trump voice, so we might pull that out off air at some point.
I don't know. Maybe sometime you got to do the grand debut.
Yeah. If I'm feeling
really
confident about, it's kind of like a celebration of it. Maybe if we get enough action in the chat, if people are like, do the Trump voice, then I'll do it sometime, but not right now.
Peer pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. So he calls him a major loser, typical Trump fashion, Mr. Too Late, pretty funny jab there. As such, interestingly enough, kind of another big piece of news yesterday is the U.S. dollar dropped to a 3-year low. That's falling to numbers not seen since March of 2022. So, of course, this comes again after months of tension between both sides as rumors have swirled. Trump, again, is seeking to find a way to oust Powell before his term as Fed chair is up next year. Powell has previously balked at this notion, actually. He has said that basically a president is not able to fire him. And in some sense, he's right because it's never been done before. But a lot of people are wondering simply, has it never been done before because it's not allowed, or just has it never been done before because it's never been done before? What makes all of this even more intriguing, again, is Trump was the one who picked Powell back in 2018. And so in light of all of this, some investors seem to be overwhelmingly concerned about what a potential firing would do to the equity markets. This is all according to CNBC, of course. As such, the markets were a little bit in a tizzy yesterday, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we do that, Sam, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. What do you make of all of this? First of all, it's kind of fun. It's fun to see
drama. I do like drama. Markets hate drama.
Fun. Yeah,
I like drama.
Absolutely. But yeah. So, what do we make of this?
Well, the real question is, can Donald Trump actually do this? Because you're right, it's never been tried before. So, according to Newsmax, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, establishing the Fed, stipulates that members of its board of governors appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, it's unclear if they can be fired. They can only be removed for cause, which so far, until it's been tried by Trump, has only meant for causes like misconduct. They're actually misbehaving, not over a policy disagreement. So this will be a first. If a president's going to say, I disagree with what the Fed is doing, therefore you're out of here, that's going to be something for the Supreme Court to decide.
Very interesting. So, so we'd have to get the high court in there. That, Sam, would be a whole nother can of worms that we'd open, because the Supreme Court apparently is not as reliable as we maybe thought it was. There's been some comments in the chat, actually. I think John brought up here, just kind of what the Supreme Court's been doing when it's come to the, immigration issue. And I do think we have to be concerned about at least one, maybe several more of some of the quote, conservative members of the Supreme Court. So,
and this is an up in the air type of issue. Yeah. You could imagine a Supreme Court justice, even a conservative one, saying that that's too much power for the executive and maybe side against Trump, maybe even one of the really conservative justices. So this is something where I can't even predict how it's going to shake out in the end.
Yeah, for sure. Boy, it's really going to be interesting, folks. Sam, you're exactly right. It's been a 7-year saga. It really has. Ever since Trump appointed Jerome Powell, and certainly certainly ever since Trump began his reelection bid. I mean, there was talks, at least under the surface of, if Trump gets reelected, what's going to happen with Powell? We don't know. The possibility of him being able to oust Powell, again, it's unprecedented. That's probably why so many people think that it can't be done. But you know what, Sam? I'll say this. I'm enjoying the fact that there is some actual push and pull here. I'm not in favor of people calling people losers, as funny as the insult might be when it's talking about political, people. But I do like that someone is holding Jerome Powell accountable. There was none of this during the Biden administration. The Fed was basically just totally, as Dan used to say, leading from behind. Someone is now holding them accountable. It just so happens to be the president of the United States, and he's doing it in classic Trump fashion, of course. But I do like that, and I'm hoping that we at least see some kind of change here where we're not going to see the Fed leading from behind as much. I have Dan in my head saying that all the time, and it was true back then, it's true now, that the Fed far too often does lead from behind, claims to be apolitical, clearly is not apolitical, because none of us are apolitical. And that can be really dangerous when you've got an entire organization that is in control of pretty much of all of our money, and has a whole lot to do when it talks about investments and different things like that. So all that to say, I'm in favor of some accountability. The question, of course, Sam, is how much accountability can Trump give?
Exactly.
We don't know.
Yep, that's the real question here. And I think the Fed is inherently reactive. I don't even know how it could lead in a true sense and not lead from behind or even be apolitical, because it has to, by the nature of what it's doing, react to political realities. And I think when it pretends to be apolitical, it becomes even more subject to those realities, because it's trying to play this neutral game instead of doing what it knows it needs to do. To be fair to Powell and to Trump, they both have slightly different interests here. Trump wants to lower interest rates to allow more lending power while these tariffs are going up. Meanwhile, Powell is mainly concerned, it seems, about inflation. We're coming out of an inflationary spiral, so he wants to keep those interest rates the same, as he's concerned what the tariffs are actually going to do. So it is that leading from behind thing. Trump wants to be proactive and actually lead, while Powell is trying to do a wait and see approach, as he's want to do, and see where these tariffs are going to go and then respond.
Absolutely. So it'll be really interesting to see this, Sam. I'll be very fascinated whenever you'll have to forgive me, I don't know when Powell's next testimony is before Congress, but whenever that is, I'm sure there will be some interesting points of conversation with that. We'll just
be a doozy for sure.
Absolutely. Yes. So get your popcorn ready, folks. But yeah, good stuff there. I have seen, we'll get to that in just a moment here. For right now, folks, let's do this. So this was the big news from yesterday, and of course, the markets reacted because of it. So yesterday seemed as though it was the Trump-Powell kerfluffle, made a lot of traders nervous, as we said. By midday, the markets were having a rough go. The major indices were each down close to 3 percentage points. By late afternoon, they continued the tailspin. They were below three full percentage points, approaching 4 full percentage points. Each of the three major averages were. And once again, I think a lot of this had to do with the fact that traders were just used to, and again, I'm saying traders very literally, because I believe that good, solid, long-term investors won't get as spooked by this kind of stuff, but traders often will. Traders were kind of uncomfortable with this public view, because I think they had gotten used to the Biden administration era attitude, where the Fed basically just trying not to rock the boat, and there really being no accountability between the two parties there. So by Monday's closing bell, the Dow Jones ended up finishing 2.5% negative. The S&P 500 finished 2.33% negative, and the NASDAQ also finished right around 2.5%, a little more than 2.5% negative. Now, the pre-markets this morning seem a little more confident as we sit right now. Let me just refresh my screen real quickly. Yeah, all three major averages are pricing in to open the day over 1 full percentage point. The Dow Jones right now is at 1.07, S&P 1.05, and the NASDAQ is about 1.16. So that's what we're looking like this morning. It seems like it's going to be, or at least it's from the looks of it, looking like it could be a pretty good day. So we'll just have to see how that goes there. But all that to say, folks, it's such a good reminder for us of a couple things. Number one, your long-term strategy is what matters. We look at what happens in the markets. We look at what Powell says. We even look at what politicians like Trump say, the back and forth there, how the markets react to it. And while understanding that these things are important, and can sometimes provide different opportunities and different things for us to need to do. We're in this for the long term. So you got to stick with that long-term strategy. And again, I can't help but stress enough, check out the partner commentary from this week because it's really good with just a reminder to continue to do that while also looking for opportunities to continue to put new money to work periodically and such things like that. That's the first lesson I tell you. The second lesson is I do think we can learn a lot from what not to do when we're talking about the Fed trying to play both sides. It is far better to pick a side and stick to your guns. Now, as Christians, we believe that there is a right side to all things, that the right side is the side of God. It is what the scripture commands, and we need to be on that side. I do believe that in our life, we're going to come into instances where there's going to be nuance with things, but oftentimes there's also going to be issues where you have got to pick a side and you've got to pick the right side. And so make sure to cling to the truth obviously ultimately found in God's word. I hope that can be a good little life lesson for us. Folks, if you have to leave us, half-hour audience, we hope that you'll join us again for the show tomorrow. The rest of you, we got more financial issues coming up here. We'll get to some of your partner questions as well as some other things, the Ag Report and more coming up on financial issues. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
I just love the first book of Exodus. The king says, the Jews are too many. Get rid of them. I command you to kill the firstborn. But the midwives to the Hebrews heard the order, and what did they do? They defied it. And God dealt favorably with the midwives and gave them families. He blessed them for loving life. He blessed them for saving babies. We have re-entered the death cult in this country. You think about how much we elevate death, whether it be the chopping off of parts and we call it transgender care, whether it be shouting our abortion, and you see it so beautifully in John 10:10. It is the divide of the entire scriptures. Now, most people would say John 3:16, but think about it. The enemy has come to lie, steal, cheat, and destroy. I have come to give life and life more abundantly. That's the whole ball game, everybody. It is everything. And we have to have the joy of Jesus Christ to enjoy life and to protect it. It's a gift from above. And Preborn is leading the charge.
What separates Crossroads Kids Club from other ministries to reach school-age children? What sets you guys apart?
First of all is our connection with local churches. We mobilize, equip, train, support local church partners. We're right inside the schools. There's a number of ministries that try to serve public school children outside of the school, but we're able to be right there on the campus. Another key thing is just our values. Our highest value is actually relationships. And so we're not a ministry that's driven by a lot of fancy technology or flashy stuff, but rather getting adults who love Jesus and who love kids to sit on the floor with a group of kids, to listen to them, to love them. So I would say the relational emphasis and the simplicity of the model is actually something that makes Crossroads special as well.
Help reach kids with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurschools.com.
Thanks so much for joining us on the program today, folks. Good to see so many of you on the chat. I'm loving the Gandalf the White reference from Jason, Claude, Gandalf the Grey from Pope. You guys just crack me up. You're so funny. Lisa, good to see you. And Nelson, Several people have called for the Trump voice, so we might do it later in the show if I'm feeling up for it. Good to see so many.
But then the pressure's on. You might mess up.
I know. That's exactly right. Well, I figured I would just, I can say it right now real quickly. But there could be a slowing of the economy unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, lowers interest rates, millions of dollars. Anyway, so that's kind of how that goes.
Just a taste. Right?
That's right. That's just a small taste of it. The markets, folks, let's take a look at what they're looking at right here. Just opened up. Everything in very positive territory, looking like a comeback day here to start at least. The Dow Jones up a full percent. The S&P 500 also up a full percent. Same with the NASDAQ as well. So that's what we have there on the markets. Sam, let's get to a very interesting partner comment we got yesterday. I'd love to hear this one from Davey. What do we got?
Yes, very interesting question from Davey indeed. He says, "Hi, FISM team. You are the best. I've listened to you and been a partner since Dan. Now, I was listening to Preborn, a commercial this morning, and there was a thought that was flashing through my mind. Instead of trying to save unborn babies, why don't we heavily promote young people to focus on academics and athletics? This will not only stop unexpected and unnecessary pregnancies from happening, but more importantly, build a much more productive generation. I'm aware it's easy to say, but extremely difficult to do because of the corrupt mainstream culture. And while a majority of American high school and college kids worry about their sex and love lives, their counterparts in China, our most dangerous adversary, are busy learning STEM, med, and everything good. Please share your thoughts."
Well, Davey, it's a good question. I appreciate you asking. Folks, we got this on our partner portal. If you just go on to financialissues.org and click that, the contact us button, you can just submit general questions there. So this was from Davey yesterday. It's a good question, Davey. And I do appreciate your partnership. Been a partner since Dan. That's awesome. Let me address your question this way. So why don't we heavily promote young people to focus on academic and athletic? Here's the issue, kind of the overarching issue. I'd love to hear Sam's thoughts on this as well. The abortion issue is not just a social issue or a political issue or, an issue that can be solved just by getting kids to be busy, to be highly educated, to play sports, to get a good job. The problem is you see a lot of young women, for example, who have those things. Maybe they come from not an impoverished family. They have a good education. They get a good job, but they still get pregnant out of wedlock because abortion is a spiritual issue. It's not a social issue in and of itself. Ultimately, this is a spiritual issue. It's the murder of babies. This is the destruction of God's design. When we're talking about the most innocent form of human life, these are ultimately, it's funny, you hear on the left people always talking about giving a voice to the voiceless, yet they ignore actually the people who are voiceless. My son, Knox, is now outside of the womb. I can hear his voice. I've been able to hear his voice for the last 5 weeks. But when he was inside the womb, I could not hear his voice. He was voiceless, actually. This is a voiceless generation. And so my question is, if we don't save them, who will? If Christians aren't leading the fight, if conservatives aren't leading the fight, no one will. It's been a genocide, a bloodbath the last 50 years. I've seen the numbers of during the Roe v. Wade era, 65 million babies were murdered in the United States, 65 million unborn babies. So my answer to your question initially there, Davey, is we need to save unborn babies. We have to. And the reason is because it is a spiritual issue. Now, I do agree with you that I think it's good to help young people focus on things that can be good and virtuous for them, like academics, like athletics. And I definitely can see that building a more productive generation as well. But that is going to be simply perhaps some medicine that could help part of the cure. That's not going to be the cure itself. I mean, the cure itself is going to be raising up a generation of people who love the Lord Jesus Christ more than they love anything else. And I really think that's what it comes down to, Sam. Am I off base there?
No, you ripped the words right out of my mouth that it's a spiritual problem at its heart. I think I really take issue with the instead of trying to save unborn babies. I don't see why you can't do both. Why can't you save unborn babies and also fix the culture? In fact, I think that part of the reason the culture is so rotten is we've devalued life in such a way because of abortion. So I think by fixing the abortion problem, you're naturally going to be fixing the culture. culture in some way. A couple other things here. He mentions a majority of American high school and college kids worry about their love and sex life. I don't think there's anything you can do about that. That's just saying that American high school and college kids are American high school and college kids. That's like, I wish the young people stopped caring about sex. Well, that's kind of part of being young, isn't it? So I wish the world wasn't the way it was. I'm not sure there's too much you can do about that. Finally, he mentions China. He's right that China is a much more serious country than we are in many ways, but that's not to say that they're not without problems, right? Because they're a dying country, because they're not having kids. Yes, that they do produce a lot of good tech, but most of it's reverse engineered from our own stuff, and their GDP requires 4 people to match the economic output of 1 American. So they do have a lot of problems. We have problems too, but that's not to say you look at China and say they have everything figured out.
Sam, you're right on there. And, bringing it back to a spiritual issue, too, China has not gotten the abortion issue right. Let's not forget, folks, that I don't know if this rule was overturned, might have been overturned in the last couple of years, but China once had a one-child policy where if you had more than 1 child, you were, I believe, and Sam, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that it was actually governmentally required that you abort that child, that you do not have that child because they believe they were having too many people. Well, it's now resulted in, like Sam said, they're a dying country. So there's serious structural issues with China.
Yeah, they had to get rid of that policy because they knew it was a death wish.
That's exactly
they figured it out too late.
That's exactly right. So there are things that China is doing that actually the United States, as imperfectly as we do it, is doing it far better, far better. But Sam, I agree with you completely. The majority of American high school and college kids worry about their sex life and their love life because they love those things more than they love Christ. They have not been catechized in what is good, true, and beautiful. They've been catechized by the world. They've been catechized by public school. They've been catechized by television. And so they've been brought up to believe this is just what we do. You date people in high school and you have sex with them, and if you get pregnant, you get an abortion and all that crazy stuff there, instead of being catechized in what the scripture says about sexual purity and about marriage being between 1 man and 1 woman, and about not awakening or arousing love before it so desires, and about how God loves the little ones and cherishes life, and how abortion is murder and different things like that. So, Davey, let me just say this as well. You had mentioned preborn. I think it's important to note preborn saves unborn babies. That's what they do. They save unborn babies. They spread the gospel. But they also do that other side that you mentioned as well. They provide counsel and help to women and to families after the child is born. They provide diapers. They provide supplies. They provide all sorts of other things that it's not just, and I'm not sure why there are so many people in our culture who think, conservatives are just about, making sure that the baby gets out of the womb, and once the baby's out of the womb, they don't care.
They're pro-birth, they're not pro-life. That's the talking point.
Yeah, preborn nukes that. Preborn just nukes it. Preborn is pro-life through and through. And by the way, we also have Crossroads Kids Club, which kind of picks up where, we kind of hand the baton off from preborn and early life to when they're children to try to catechize them to love and serve Christ. So all that to say, Davey, I agree with Sam completely. Why not have both? Why not have both? Why not have a culture where we can catechize children to love Christ and to pursue the things that are good, true, and virtuous, and also save babies, and also make abortion unthinkable, and also shut down every single Planned Parenthood in this country because it's satanic. All that stuff to say, Davey, I appreciate your comments. Folks, you got to check out Preborn, by the way. They're doing some great work, preborn.com. We have the Ag Report here from Craig Haugaard, and then we'll get back to some more financial issues right after this. Here comes Craig Haugaard with today's Ag. Stick with us.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for April 22nd. Corn had a quiet session on the heels of the 3-day weekend. Rains over the weekend in the U.S. performed as well or better than expected, while the dry weather prior to the rains allowed planting progress to advance. After the close, the crop progress report shows that 12% of the corn crop has been planted, which is a bit more than what the trade was expecting. July corn finished today a 0.25 cent lower at $4.90 per bushel. The soybean complex started the week on a weaker note as macro weakness weighed on ag commodities. Also pressuring prices was China's belligerent response to U.S. tariffs and improved weather in the Western Hemisphere. On the positive side, trade negotiations are ongoing with several countries Treasuries, with Japan reportedly considering an increase in purchases of U.S. soybeans, rice, meat, and potatoes. July beans were 6 1/4 cents lower at $10.41.5. Wheat markets were lower straight across the board as traders reacted to nice rains over the weekend in Oklahoma as well as portions of Texas and Kansas. Good weather also allowed spring wheat planting to move forward, with 17% of that crop in the ground thus far. At the close, we had Minneapolis July wheat 5 1/2 cents lower at $6.13 3/4. Kansas City declined by 6 1/4 cents, closing at $5.63 3/4, and Chicago was a dime lower at $5.52 1/4. Cotton futures started the week on a softer note. At the closing bell, we had July futures down 31 points at 66.82. Livestock futures were mixed. June live cattle futures were 32 1/2 cents lower at $203.75 per hundredweight. August feeder cattle were $1.72 1/2 cents lower as they closed out the session at $289.15 per hundred. But we had June lean hog futures a whopping 2 1/2 cents higher, $98.05 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures had a bit of a retreat. At the closing bell, May futures were down 14 points at 18.16. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
Hi, this is Sheena Bird, the host of Financial Issues. The Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn logo. Save a baby, save a life.
Pharrell came to Crossroads as a 4th grader. His name had been brought to my attention by the school principal. She was concerned about the direction he was heading.
I remember I wasn't the best kid. I got into trouble a lot.
He became a very active part of Crossroads Kids Club.
Mr. Engel, he was the leader that really impacted my life in so many ways. I honestly didn't want Crossroads to end.
We would invite all the students to come to our youth group here at Waterfront.
I felt God saying, come on, come to me. It felt like I was set free.
And I'll never forget the day when we had the privilege and the honor to baptize Pharrell.
I hugged Mr. Engel. I don't know if he understands. I'm truly, thankful to have him through the whole journey. If it wasn't for Crossroads, I probably wouldn't be in the place that I am right now. I wouldn't be a follower of Christ.
Help reach more kids like Pharrell with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurSchools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back once again, folks. Financial Issues. Davey, I really appreciate your question there, brother. I do hope that we answered it. It's a good question, and I think you're asking those right ones there. But yeah, I would urge you, and I would urge all of you. There are few fights that are more important than the fight for life, and especially when you're talking about unborn life. That goes hand in hand, of course, with the fight for truth and for bringing the gospel to these lives. That's why Preborn is so good, because Preborn saves thousands of babies every year. They also witness thousands of conversions, thousands of regenerations, where God miraculously restarts the dead hearts of thousands of mothers and fathers based on them seeing their children and coming, to a full sense of that God created this life, then they come to true life in Jesus Christ. So that's why Preborn's so good. They're just doing some amazing, amazing things. We're proud to partner with them. So, yeah, preborn.com is a place to go there. Good question there, Davey. All right, Sam, let's jump to the West Coast here and take a look at what's happening in San Francisco. Apparently taking a financial hit over some DEI backlash, which is just horrible.
You could say that. Yeah, I know.
That's sarcasm.
One singular tear falls from my eye, splashes on the audio board. But yes, we were talking about in the previous segment about changes that need to happen in the culture. Yeah. And it looks like the changes are a-coming, because you are right. San Francisco Pride is not doing too hot right now. The organizers of the LGBT event say they're making do with a smaller budget this year as major companies are pulling their funding from the annual parade and festival. SF Pride Executive Director Suzanne Ford said companies have been, quote, rethinking their investment as they distance themselves from DEI programs. She said that 5 companies have pulled their sponsorship this year, resulting in a loss of $300,000. In fact, Seth, one of those companies, surprisingly, is Bud Light's parent company, Anheuser-Busch. So maybe the lesson is finally catching up to them. Maybe they're thinking, maybe we don't want to do that again. Yeah. Just maybe. And by the way, the clock is ticking for them to get that money. As of late March, SF Pride has roughly 3 months to raise over $1 million in order to reach their goal of $2.3 million.
That's awesome. I say good. Absolutely. Whenever we see something like this, same thing when we see a Planned Parenthood get shut down. I think we can all say praise God for that. Sam, it's fascinating. So fascinating. If Bud Light, or in this case Anheuser-Busch, their parent company, they're doing all these backdoor things to make secret apologies. It's a secret apology. Oh, we messed up here, but they're not actually coming out and say, just apologize. Just apologize to your consumer base. We should not have hired Dylan Mulvaney. Like that would solve so many problems. They're doing all the right things behind the scenes, but with no apology, it feels disingenuous, doesn't it? So
unfortunately, this is the way of the corporate world, as is the case in politics. I was begging for any politician during COVID-19 to come out and say, we really messed up there. We did a lot of bad things. We need to do it differently. But no, it was the double, the triple, the quadruple down. Yeah. Same thing with these companies. Yes, they backtrack. They don't do the same thing anymore. Right. But there's never this moment of admitting to their customer base that, yes, we did mess up. We understand you and we're going to change. Even though, yes, they are changing. But yeah, it'd be so nice if they just communicated that change.
It certainly would. And I want to be clear, we're glad when they change. In fact, that's really core to our strategy is we want to, in what we do, actually hold these companies' feet to the fire. The companies that we tell you all to invest in, there's an accountability relationship there where we want them to understand, hey, we got a large army of investors here that are putting their money into your company. Don't mess it up. Biblically responsible companies don't become non-biblically responsible. And if you do, we want to make our voices heard. That's why we have our petitions. That's why we issue sell alerts. But yeah, so important, especially when we're looking at this in particular, the pride stuff, as well as from the previous segment, the abortion stuff. Those really do seem to be probably the 2 hot button issues that we talk about, folks. So don't be surprised when you're seeing sell alerts, for instance, that have to do with things like that. But yeah, this is why our strategy is so important. This is why what FISM does is so important, and really why we cannot do it without all of you. And so if you care about this stuff, if you're a Christian, you love Christ, and you want to see change in the culture, you've come to the right place. So Sam, that's a good news there. I'm grateful to see that for sure. And of course, I never want to delight in the sufferings of others. This could probably mean that people lose their jobs. But for long-term good, for them to be able to maybe see the folly in their ways, I'm all for it. Same
right,
thing.
And this is a major turnaround for them. I mentioned on a previous show, yes, that there was all this blowback to Dylan Mulvaney, but I was looking at some of our screening tools, and Anheuser-Busch was still supporting Pride events well into late 2024. So hopefully this is a sign that they've learned the lesson for good. They're not going to be saying one thing and doing another. Their yes is going to be yes, their no is going to be no. So let's pray that's the case with this company.
Absolutely. Good stuff there, man. Thanks for bringing that up there, Sam. Well, let's bring kind of a full circle to our show here, Sam. I saw an interesting headline. I'd love to get your thoughts, actually. So, folks, if you were here with us in the beginning of the show, you heard Jason and I talking about, the relationship between China and the United States. I was very encouraged to hear Jason's words by it, definitely, to kind of hear, okay, you know what? Seems like we can at least stand on our own 2 feet. We've got the upper hand here. But China's not going away. So I saw this headline yesterday. China's threatening countermeasures now against countries that trade with the United States. So it's basically trade business with the U.S., the latest counterpunch between the two superpowers. The Chinese Commerce Ministry said in a statement Monday, quote, China firmly opposes any party reaching a deal at the expense of China's interest. If this happens, China will never accept it and will resolutely take countermeasures in a reciprocal manner. China is determined and capable of safeguarding its own rights and interests. Appeasement will not bring peace, and compromise will not be respected. This is the China we know and love.
The classic faux indignant.
China.
I'm going to take the moral high ground when I'm actually an evil dictatorship.
Absolutely. I think we saw a headline, maybe it was last week. China was saying like all the right things, like saying nice sounding things. And now this sounds more like China here, though. So the Trump administration, by the way, is looking to reach a trade deal with China in the next several weeks. So I'll be interested, Sam, to see what that might look like. But again, I harken back to what Jason said at the beginning of the show. It really does seem like we have the upper hand here.
We have the Trump card, you could say.
That's right. That's as one might say. That's exactly right. And it does seem like China seems like they're backed in a corner, and so this is now kind of their last resort is threats. And, the tough part is there will be some countries that may listen to these threats. But, hopefully there will be countries that will see, well, hold on here. It's actually far better for us to do business with the leader of the free world than with the, leader of communism in the world, basically.
Yeah, it might be a better deal, right?
It just might be.
It's interesting, Seth. I looked at their statement, and maybe I missed something, but they don't even explain what the threats actually are. So this could just be saber rattling because they don't say what they're going to do, other than there's going to be some sort of countermeasure. So I don't know, does that mean that they're going to put tariffs on other countries? But that doesn't really work because China doesn't buy anything from other countries. They mainly export things from other countries, or to other countries, and that's why they're at such a disadvantage in this whole trade war.
Sure. Yep. That's exactly right. So, folks, we'll be keeping an eye on all this for sure here. But that's kind of what's going on from China's perspective in this now. So those countermeasures, we'll have to see what those look like here. One more headline here, Sam, I thought was interesting, especially for our listeners here. Gold surges to a record high as Trump is threatening Fed independence. So this harkens back to our segment 2 conversation between Trump and Powell, the kerfluffle going on. Gold surged to new heights yesterday. It's been on a roll this year, reached a new record over $3,400. The price of gold has surged 30% this year and more than 8% since Trump began ramping up his tariff talk in early April. So gold has been doing some good things. It's good, folks, for us to make sense of this. And again, I would encourage you to read the partner commentary whenever you get the chance for this. Even as we're seeing, some potentially good things about, I'll just say it, about gold and about silver and things like that. Remember the things that Dan would always say too, just as a word of caution, that you have to just be prepared, for example, to hold gold yourself. It's a good idea not to pay someone else to hold on to it yourself. And just be ready also that if you are going to make a transaction with it, there's a good chance it could be more cumbersome than if you're making an equity transaction on your brokerage platform, for example, where you click a mouse and in several seconds the transaction's complete. With gold, physical gold, it's not going to be quite as easy about that. It's just good to do our due diligence. If you do own it, of course, you can check out our, partner commentary and other things like that on our buy list as well to look for more information into that. But it's good to keep an eye on that there, folks.
And those are good reasons why you don't want to stake your whole life on gold, right?
That's exactly right. Absolutely. Yeah. It would be far better to stake your eternity on the kingdom that has streets of gold than on the physical gold.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you. Absolutely.
I see what you did there.
Speaking of that, Sam, let's close our show here in the scriptures. Psalm 24, verses 1 through 2. A good reminder for us. The earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell within, for he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. Folks, we should be good stewards of this world that God has made. We need to remember it is God's world, and being a good steward of it means living by his rules. His rules include the fact that human lives come first above those of animals and plants. We've been made as vice regents over this world, meaning that it is biblical to value the lives of humans over that of any other kind of life on this earth. And ultimately, what's most important is the souls of those humans, that we're to be good stewards of the gospel, first for those in our influence. You know, by God's grace, none of us has been called to bring the gospel to every single person in the world. We've corporately been called to bring the gospel to the ends of the earth, but our specific calling is to impact our sphere around us, meaning if you have children, grandchildren, that's your first mission field, folks. So be encouraged by that and bring the gospel to them. Be good stewards of it, sharing the hope of Jesus to a world that desperately needs to hear it. Great show today, folks. It was a joy to be here. God willing, we'll do it again tomorrow. Until then, remember, it's all His. Let's be found good and faithful stewards. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time for more Financial Issues.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.